Before we get started, let me just say that if you like the kind of content that I'm making and you want to help support the channel, then the absolute best way that you can do that is through Patreon. Any and all contributions make a huge difference. If you're the kind of person that wants to help support a channel like this, then there's links to my Patreon in the live chat and also in the description below. Thank you. Now, let's get on with the video. One commonality with cult leaders, generally speaking, is that they all seem to have these visions for the world. They want to change the world in some way. They want to make the world over in their image. And the rank and file typically are brought in as the labour force employed to make that a reality. Trouble is, despite their disturbing capacity to recruit and make people over in their image, cults aren't that good always at keeping people for that long. Some stick around their whole life while others walk away, and yet others are helped to leave by supportive, loving family members and friends. Today I want to look at some of the strange and honestly amusing problems that a lot of cult leaders come up against while they're trying to change the world, while simultaneously blundering headfirst into situations where their shortcomings are overwhelmingly obvious. Let's look at some of the unoriginal things that cult leaders do to get in their own way while they're trying to change the world. Cult leaders tend to assert something, usually untrue, or a misrepresentation of the truth, or sometimes actually a misunderstanding of the truth, as if it is the absolute truth. It matches up with their own map of reality, the cult map of reality, but it doesn't always match up with the reality that everybody else outside the cult is aware of. And if their bold but baseless assertions are fact-checked with independent sources, then they don't stand up. Usually fact-checking results in cult members turning away. This obviously has been anticipated to some extent, whether knowingly or unknowingly, by the average cult leader, and access to non-cult sources of information tends to be discouraged. Of course, that's one of the points on the model that we use to determine what's an unsafe group and what isn't, what's a cult and what isn't. So as awareness of unsafe leaders, unsafe groups, undue influence, cults increases, then this particular issue will become a red flag for more and more people, as it should be. It's kind of a catch-22 for cult leaders though, because if they let their followers look at non-cult sources of information, they're going to realise that the leader's talking absolute shit. And if they discourage them from looking at non-cult sources of information, then they are going to risk ticking another point on the bite model and sticking out like a sore thumb to anyone who knows anything about cults. When you're a cult member and you think that your leader is the absolute best thing ever, it's pretty hard to see them for what they are. You've already got that idea in your head. Some cult leaders are nasty old men, just looking for things that I can't talk about without getting demonetized. Others are as indoctrinated as the previous generation of leaders because they were born into the cult, the group, whatever, and they have received tried and true indoctrination since the minute they were born, basically. Others make these bold claims that there's no way to prove just so that they can seem better or different to everybody else. A lot of cult leaders have this obsession with being put on a pedestal, with being the most special person in the room. The sheer volume of cult leaders that I have heard talk about how attractive they are, how magic they are, how special they are, how enlightened they are, all the superpowers that they've got, it's dizzying. Of course, it's quite normal to want to feel special, but most of us don't let it get out of hand to the extent that cult leaders do. Still, whatever the reason, whatever the motivation, the average cult leader tends to tell these stories. They tend to paint these grandiose pictures. They spin these 4K yarns about how special they are and how much more special than everybody else they are. But the moment this illusion shatters, the moment this adoration for these people who are so much better than everybody else apparently goes away, often, or at least sometimes, because of hearing about other leaders who are doing the same thing that their leader's doing, so that it becomes obvious that they're not that special, they're not that unique, they're not that original. People start to see these leaders for what they are, and they start to see what they're saying for what it is. For me, when that illusion shattered, what I saw was that all of these things that were being said were usually the sad and desperate fantasies of someone who, rather than being in a leadership position, would be much better off in intensive therapy, getting the help that they sorely need. The master of the universe illusion of the previous point kind of feeds into this one, but before, where we were talking about how this person claims to have all this beauty and all this intelligence and all these powers or whatever, this point we're talking about the limitations of the human mind with regards to how much knowledge you can actually have, and the limitations of the human experience with regards to how much knowledge you can actually have. You can't know everything, right? And that old thing about knowing what you don't know kind of rings true here. The issue that arises here is, given just how susceptible the average person is to the nasty recruitment tactics and the nasty indoctrination tactics of cults, just about anybody can end up in a cult. So the fact that that is the case means that when there's a leader on stage and they're talking about any given subject, there's a chance of at least sometimes there being someone in the audience who is hearing what they're saying and knows that it's nonsense. Like, they have enough knowledge to see through what's being said. Taking into account the spanner in the works, that is undue influence, and how cults work in general regarding this point, it still stands that there's always going to be someone who knows more than the cult leader about a given thing, provided what they're talking about is something that has like grounds in reality and it's not just, they've not just pulled it out their ass, you know. There's always going to be someone ready and able to discredit the nonsense that these leaders come out with, just so long as they can stand their idiosyncratic drivel for long enough to actually develop an opinion on it and make sense of it, you know. And if there's no one in the actual room that can drive a wedge between fact and cult-flavoured fiction, then you just wait until a clip gets uploaded to the internet. Ideas are refined over time, through trial and error, through testing how well they stand up in the field. And where truth is concerned, cult leaders so often offer up their opinions as facts and these deepities as profound wisdom that never really lands, but they don't like being pulled up on that. Basically everything that comes out of a cult leader's mouth is to be treated as gold-plated gold, and the sometimes deliberately confusing word salads are not to be questioned. Never to be questioned. Whether you're genuinely curious or concerned and doing like a healthy evaluation of the situation, questioning a cult leader's methods, their rationale, their integrity, their history, or that of the group can lead to some serious consequences. It's not out of the ordinary for the average cult leader to, when challenged, lash out and basically throw a tantrum like a kid. But where it used to happen behind closed doors in a commune where only a certain number of people would see it, now it's on the internet for everyone to see and remember and retweet. Members of cults who have asked too many questions quite often find themselves cast out, cut off from friends and family, and sometimes, maybe even often, bombarded with a barrage of venomous, often childlike insults and undermining loaded questions and so on and so forth. Sometimes even threats. And if they don't get cast out for asking questions, then their questions go unanswered. And if an answer is offered, then it tends to be yet more confusing word salads intended to further indoctrinate, so the questions don't really get answered. The questions sit around in the minds of cult members wrestling with the undue influence they're under, and the thoughts stagnate, and after a while, the cult member will want to look for answers. Not always, but sometimes they will take those unanswered questions and they will just go and look for answers, and they're not getting them from inside the cult, and this path sometimes leads them to walk away and never return. Generally speaking, destructive cults can be so controlled, so absolute in their rules and restrictions that maintenance alone is the bulk of the effort for those in positions of authority. And for those who aren't in positions of authority, getting enough people to fulfill the grandiose vision of the cult leader, from free-thinking, critically minded, independent adult to childlike indoctrinated cult member, that's a full-time job. Of course, modern cults tend to automate it, and they fly in under the radar with videos on the internet, which basically passively indoctrinates hundreds, thousands of people without them really doing much other than creating the video in the first place and putting it out there. They just need to make sure there's enough propaganda going out often enough so that these people have, you know, enough to sink their teeth into when they decide to, or feel encouraged to quite often, watch video after video after video because of the way that the videos are done. For a destructive cult to survive, often it has to change. It has to adapt to the societal climate it's in order to stay relevant. And to maintain its carefully constructed image, it has to tread really lightly when it's clapping back at people who have challenged it because they abhor destructive control and undue influence. Some cult leaders manage this better than others, and some just get away from themselves a little bit. The plus side is that it just seems that us humans aren't that great at having our real identities pushed into the corners of our mind. And it turns out that just as a cult leader pretty much always shows their true colours sooner or later, if they weren't already apparent to everybody outside the group, the personality of the person who has been sort of conditioned into this cult identity, the truth of who that person is underneath, that resurfaces in the end too. That shows itself sooner or later too. Something I keep thinking about is that when a thing relies so much on so many moving parts, it's typically doomed to fail, especially when we're talking about those moving parts being things humans are doing. Human error plays a huge part in the failure of these things, and human error is unavoidable. If it's not human error, then undue influence goes against cults, really, because it seems to turn our human nature against itself. And it's our nature. It's gonna resurface, it's gonna reassert itself sooner or later, you know. And when something like this is set up so it has to be just so in order to be sustainable, it's not gonna last that long. And if it does, it's a remarkable example of how toxic humans can be to each other, I think. Obviously, there are larger groups which have been around a long time, and they seem to have got the formula down. The fortunate thing is that while these smaller groups do tend to look up to the leaders of these larger groups, they do tend to look to the long-standing traditions of these cults that are, you know, years and years and years old. They don't always manage to get the formula down in the way that these other groups do. So one kink in the process, one former inner circle member walking away and speaking to the media, one too many people taken advantage of, and the house of cards comes tumbling down. I really hope that you got something from this video. If you want to get in touch with me personally, you can do that through my social media. All the links are below. Twitter's probably the best way to do that. Along with all my social media links in the description below, there's a link to my Patreon. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're the kind of person that wants to support a channel like this and you've got the funds to do so, then I'd be really grateful for that. While we're on Patreon, I just want to say a big thank you to my current patrons, Manau, Amanda and Remus. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. As I always say, it baffles me that people are willing to give me money to do this kind of thing, but I'm always so grateful that you are. For everybody else, if you want to support this channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon, but if you can't do that right now, then please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell if you want to be notified for when I upload new videos. And if you're interested in connecting with other people who are into this kind of thing as well and are doing this kind of research or have had previous experiences with cults, then you can do that through my Discord and my Facebook group. Both of those are linked below in the description as well. I will bid you farewell for the minute, but if you want to stick around and watch more videos, then I'll see you in the next one.